So one of the things that I get asked regularly when it comes to, interpreting Scripture, and especially the literary hermeneutic or the literary ways in which, I read Scripture and talk about on these videos, is where did you get this information? Where does this come from? Well, the answer might surprise you. It comes from the Hellenistic world. One of the things that we think about when we do biblical interpretation is a lot of times we figure the locus of truly understanding Scripture is what we would call Second Temple Palestine, which there is some truth to that. There's a lot of great things that we can get from that. But one of the things that we fail to understand is that a lot of the ways in which the New Testament writers have written to us is the way that the writers would write in the first century. And before that, when you go all the way back to Aristotle and you go back to Plato, and you see the way that they wrote, Plato, and it's indicative of literary, writing in that time. Plato used what we called chiastic literature, which is the best way to look at that or to envision that is an upside down V. You start somewhere, you end somewhere, and both of those are the same. And then you have a literary center. And the writers knew their geography. They knew the center of their books, and they knew the beginning and the ending of their books. For instance, Plato's Republic starts with the myth of Gyges and ends with the myth of Gyges. That's where Tolkien got the Lord of the Rings. And the literary center of the Republic is the revelation of the philosopher king. That's not by accident. Augustine in his Confessions, many, many years later, he understands the same ways in which to write. He starts off with that his heart is restless, that he's restless in his life. He ends Confessions with that he has found rest. What's the direct literary center of Confessions? It's his conversion. That's not by accident. And we see that in the New Testament over and over again, and it's part of how to read and learn Scripture, reading through a literary, way of doing things. You come to John, who I believe, and I realize there's some that don't, but I believe that John wrote not only John, I believe he wrote Revelation, and I believe he wrote 1 John. And one of the things that we can see in reading John is once again this literary center that John knew his geography. What is the literary center of the Gospel of John? Well, it's chapter 12. And in chapter 12, what do we find out? We find out that the ruler of this world has been cast down. Now, that may not mean anything to anybody until you go to Revelation. And what's the direct center literarily in Revelation? Well, it's chapter 12. And what happens there? Well, the serpent is cast down from heaven. Coincidence? I think not. I think John knew the center of his books. I think he knew how to write in a literary way, and learning to understand how to read that helps us out. We also see it in 1 John, don't we? In 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, which is the direct literary center of that epistle, what do we find out? That Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil. So in learning to read in a literary way, we have to understand that inverted V, that chiastic theme of beginning and ending and having a direct middle where there's a point to be made in the middle of the story is super important. And I hope that helps you when you read the biblical books.